Please welcome to the stage Lieutenant General Bob Shea.
Okay, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've made it our way through lunch and to our final speaker, who will take the stage in a moment. We are happy to do the introduction here for our next speaker, and thrilled to have the DISA Executive Deputy Director Tony Montemarano and of Joint Force Headquarters DODIN Executive Director Jeffrey Jones to join us to provide the closing address. Mr. Montemarano has been with DISA since before it was DISA. He's certainly been with it a long time and seen a lot of program changes and a lot of organizational changes, and that's for sure. Joining the DISA Program Management Office upon his retirement from the Navy in 1992. He assumed his current role in January 2015 and focuses on optimizing the agency's internal operations. Now, Mr. Jones joined Joint Force Headquarters DODIN in February of this year and assists in the execution of DODIN and defensive cyberspace operations, as well as synchronizing these efforts with other agencies. Prior to his current assignment, he has held several civilian roles at Army Cyber Command, most recently as Chief of Staff of Joint Force Headquarters. Our facilitator for the discussion today is Bob Ackerman. He's been at Signal Magazine for more than 3 decades and has been the editor-in-chief for over 20 years. And frankly, a good friend of mine and a great example to our workforce of that steady commitment and professionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our speakers to the stage.
Okay.
I'll take the end chair.
Still going?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you, Bob, Tony, and Jeff. Welcome. People didn't come to hear me talk, they came to hear you talk. So let's cut right to the chase. How did the government-industry relationship change to bring us to where we are now?
So I'll start since I was there when it started to change. I think the most significant change we had, and I think something that's extremely important for us to come to grips with, is in the 80s and 90s, government looked to industry to help it to write code, to create solution sets. What we have today in 2000s and now 2010s, we can't be writing solution sets anymore. We have to rely upon what's available in industry today and adapt it to military applications. We can't be writing code inside of the government to any degree. There is certainly reasons to do it from time to time, but for the most part, we've got to take what industry has and bring it in and adapt it to our applications.
What is the biggest challenge to achieving that? Jeff, let me ask you that.
Right.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is the way we look at things now. Previously, back when Mr. Montemarano was doing punch cards, it was about it was about IT
be a long
automation.
half hour.
It was about IT automation, and now we're talking about we're using the technology that you provide for the most part to actively enable operations. Day in and day out, you enable the operations we conduct on the network to secure, operate, and defend the entirety of the DoD information network.
I think one of the things to add on to that is that the network that Jeff and I really have a lot of respect for what the Joint Force Headquarters is doing. That network, we tend to think in physical terms. The Earth is 24,000 mile circumference. But the fact of the matter is in our business, it's 250 milliseconds circumference? Or maybe it's 300 milliseconds. We're milliseconds away from our threats as opposed to hundreds or thousands of miles from our threats, which I think just changes the whole paradigm on what we're doing.
absolutely changes everything. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit, I think.
We will, but let's focus on the threat and technology. In the past, when confronted by threats, the United States always could count on being the technological wizard that could bring its assets to bear and overcome those threats. Right now, the threats are relying on our favorite technologies to pose severe challenges to us. How do we address that in the dynamic time frame we need to be able to?
So let me start. I'm not a technologist, as most people know, but the fact of the matter is the bulk of the vulnerabilities that have been exploited are things we know about today. And the fact is one of the biggest issues we have is with hygiene. So we have got to get our collective acts together just to deal with the threats that we already know about and the risks that we're taking today. As we do that, then we have to come to grips with those risks we don't know about. And that, I think, is even the longer term. But if we don't take care of the hygiene today, we've just left it as a very, very easy environment to exploit.
Jeff, your perspective from someone who didn't use punch cards.
He told me to say that, by the way.
I don't know.
No, it's really a close relationship and partnership. As Admiral Norton talked about at the opening keynote, that trusted relationship between industry and government. Because we have got to work together closely to be able to have the agility that we need to combat the threats that are coming at us from all angles. You've heard persisting engagement, one of the themes of the conference, and as we secure, operate, and defend the network on a 24/7 basis, we are persistently engaged against an adversary all day, every day. So we have to have advanced technology solutions that give us the agility to move and adapt faster than our enemy.
Okay, apropos to that, which commercial technologies will be most important to the Defense Department?
Well, okay, we've heard about it time and again. Artificial intelligence is probably the most significant technology that we have to come to grips with. As I've said in my opening remarks on Tuesday, we have to come to grips with the requirements generator. And in my personal opinion, the requirements generator is the 10-year-olds, the 11-year-olds that we have today. And these guys and gals, these are the ones, they want it now. They want things that are more natural. Now they don't want to have to log in and come to grips with various security barriers. So we have to have technologies that understand them, learn from them. Again, artificial intelligence. It's got to move forward. We've got to make it easy. I tried to log into Jabber a couple of years ago, unclassified Jabber, and somebody had me memorize 14 characters to log into Enterprise Jabber. I can't remember my social security number. I got to remember 14 characters. Okay, so how do I do it? I take that technology. What do? I take those 14 characters and I put it underneath my keyboard so nobody would find them. Okay, we've got to come to grips with that. Technology, AI has got to be there for us to make it easy for these young kids to go forward and the older ones. Go ahead.
And for me, the most important thing for us is, you've heard it time and time again this week, data. We have a tremendous amount of data. We have access to a less than optimal portion of that data. I mean, if you look left and right and think about how if each table was a data lake and none of those tables look the same, and now we have to be able to access that data that is completely unstructured, none of it looks the same. It's very difficult to really take a big picture look and run some big data analytics on that to give us basically the state of the DODIN when it's like that. So when you look at some of the frameworks, some people call that an orchestrator that could help us make sense of the different storage formats at each data lake. And essentially, if data is out there, we want access to the data that we want when we want it. If we have to wait days to get access to data, that's of no help to us. and to be honest, proprietary data formats that we can't manipulate and look at in a way that we need it in conjunction with all the other data, that's a non-starter for us these days.
Right, and I think what has to happen is when industry brings its solutions to us, they've got to recognize there is an installed base. Okay, an installed base of various data repositories, data lakes, as you refer to them. How do we come to grips with that all? Coming in with the new shiny object, that way you're trying to replace all those rusty shiny objects, okay, doesn't do us a lot of good if you expect us to just bring it in and everything else goes away. We've got an installed base of all of these data repositories or data lakes. How do we come to grips with what is out there today and take us to the next level?
Yeah,
I think that's what we have to do so that you guys can take it and actually defend us.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, we're talking about strategic all the way down to the tactical level.
Well, what must industry do to provide the commercial products in the right form that the Defense Department needs?
So this is a pet for me. One of the things that bothers me is folks that I deal with in industry, they don't know what we do or how we do it, okay? How we do what we do. And again, you have to come into grips with the installed base. Industry needs to better understand how we're configured, what we're doing, so that they can take those things and help us move it forward. So I think that's probably the most important thing for me.
Completely agree, and I'll give that a big yes and. I think it's on us to understand also what you bring to the table and how you can do that. And that's really a big key point, because in all actuality, the fact that your solution works, to me, that is interesting. The fact that your solution can integrate into our operational environment and be interoperable with all of our 43 different DoD components that we coordinate with every single day to secure, operate, and defend, that's the critical, important aspect of any solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to keep in mind is the homogeneity of our environment, and that is the non-existence of homogeneity in our environment. We are such a diverse environment. Whether you do go from the tactical to the in garrison, the fact is our in garrison is different in every base, every location. We're different. How do you come to grips with it? And if our solution sets are so sensitive to inconsistencies, well, then they're not going to be of any value added. They have to be insensitive to that. So as we go forward,
Right.
But how do you modernize and try to get this one-size-fits-all, well, that perhaps is a bad description, homogeneous, holistic approach? How can you attain the latter and do the former concurrently in the face of the dynamic threat picture?
I would say I really don't need it to be homogeneous. Really, if we break it down into what we're all doing day in and day out, a lot of it is all about the data. Having access to that data is one of the most critical things that we can do, because, you know, if we can't see it, if we can't sense it, then that's a vulnerability to our network. So if an application or a commercial sensor is storing data somewhere in a format that is not accessible to us, then we have just introduced risk into our network, because we can't correlate that with all the other data that we're collecting.
right. I think any kind of defense for this environment we have to come to grips with situational awareness. Okay, if you ever went to a network operator or anybody on the floors, did you ever notice they already had a bald spot right there? Well, that's because they're sitting there at the machines and they're doing this all day long. We've got to do a better job of giving them the tools so that they can bring all of the data together and give us some real-time decision-making methodologies.
But do we have the acquisition structure right now to be able to get innovative technologies into the system quickly from the commercial sector?
So I'm the acquisition executive of DISA, and I've really enjoyed all the criticism of the acquisition community. The fact of the matter is the acquisition community is changing. If you ever talk to Ms. Lord, the Undersecretary of Defense for A&S, she is forward thinking. She's trying to get away from this ACAT 1 a.m. business and come in with the mid-tier acquisitions and trying to be more flexible. The mere introduction of OTAs has been incredibly valuable to us, as Admiral Norton has talked about and others have talked about. These OTAs are making a difference. So we are bringing in the new technology. We are opening up and being more receptive and more flexible. Now, that's not to buy, we're not buying any A1 tanks anymore. We're doing it a little differently, but this is the right answer. Incremental growth and going forth. We're not looking for the big punch and the big theory. We're going for the iterative approach to going forward. But further, we need to exploit what is available today in industry to minimize the big acquisitions.
What does industry have to do to help both sides benefit, take advantage of better acquisition ways to get better technology into the warfighter and decision makers' hands?
Be agile along with us. Because feeding off of what Mr. Montemarano said, yeah, I think the acquisition community has made tremendous strides in the past few years to really give us much more flexibility in how we can build and acquire technology of some sort. But from the commercial side of the house, I would say with our industry partners, it's about being as agile as we want to be. Because I would say, and it's all about, so I'll just go ahead and throw it out there. So we as government entities and DOD, I don't think we're known very well for our ability to effectively articulate requirements to industry. And a lot of times you build what we ask for, but we didn't really ask you to build the right thing because we didn't really know. So it's about that trusted partnership and for industry to be able to really just say, is that really what you want during the process? And be able to lift and shift to a different way of looking at things and maybe a different type of capability than what we had originally envisioned.
And that's exactly what the OTAs are trying to address. Instead of giving you an absolute requirement, we're giving you a concept that we're looking for and asking for you to come to us and help us. You really need to understand the OTA approach to things because, again, it gives us that flexibility. It's not for commodities. It's for those prototypes that will go into production, okay? So you have to help us with that as we go forth and it's with non-traditional, but the non-traditional can link with the large business and they can do it, okay? And as I say, we are seeing more and more successes, but again, not for commodities, for the new and the different stuff and the problems we have today.
We've been talking about technology, innovation. Let's get specific. Let's take a look at some specific technologies. You mentioned AI earlier being important. Let's start with that. Give us a glimpse of where AI is headed, its importance, and what we ought to know about its future.
I think he was talking to you.
Oh, me?
Yeah, right. He's looking at you. I don't know anything about technology.
And I'd like to expand on the AI so we can talk about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and autonomy. Because really, we need machine learning to operate at scale across the enterprise to really crunch all the data that we have. And then we need the advanced artificial intelligence to help us make decisions. Because frankly, we have, like within JFHQ-DODIN, we have teams of analysts that call through data on a daily basis. And they're sitting in front of the keyboard when they get in the morning, and they're seeing all the alerts pop up on the screen, and they pick one out, and they analyze that for the next 4 hours. Might turn into something, might not. And then they do the same in the afternoon. I really need artificial intelligence to really tell us what we need to look at. So we can let the machine do the majority of the work and then let the humans come in once, as long as we're in the loop. Let us come in and make that final decision on what action to take. However, there are a lot of actions that may not need human intervention as we look to defend the network. You know, we've talked this week about self-healing networks and everything else. There are some things that maybe we just don't need to, we can relinquish to the machine. So we need to be comfortable with a level of autonomy along with the artificial intelligence.
And let me jump on it from a perspective. If you have ideas in AI, you've got to get together with Lieutenant General Shanahan. Okay, he is currently running the JAIC, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. Mr. DC, as you know, is very, very strongly behind it. It's moving fast. It's very high on the list. We got to get into the right people to show them what you're doing, and I'll tell you, they'll take it for a ride. They've got investment dollars. They're going to move forward on it. So, got to get in to see us.
Do you see AI integration and incorporation in the Defense Department as being evolutionary rather than revolutionary?
Okay, so let me go. We are, and this came up, I think, yesterday in one of the panels. We are so hung up on buzzwords, okay? I'm a cloud. I just love cloud myself. And AI is taking the new buzzword, is the new buzzword. It is another tool with which to get us to destination. But it's not going to fix everything, as Jeff was saying. It was something. But it's got to be part of the total solution set. But it's not going to be, oh my God, AI, it fixes everything. Because we're going to be hard-pressed to actually adapt to it, right? Again, we have an installed base that doesn't readily get replaced. It's going to have to be integrated evolutionarily, and then eventually it will come and dominate the future, I think it will.
Okay, let's look at the next technology on my list, mobile.
Okay, so let me, I'll start and then you can have fun. You can talk about warfighters and stuff. Okay. Again, my 10-year-old used to sit at the computer. Then he sat at the tablet. Now that he won't look at anything that's bigger than what you can hold in your hand, okay? That's the young kids of tomorrow. Those are the sailors, soldiers, and airmen of tomorrow. We have got to adapt to them. Everything has got to go to that machine. We have got to recognize that that's the future of what we do. So doing anything large, that and cloud, you put the combination, and now we've got the solution, which is obviously an overstatement or an oversimplification. But we've got to move to mobility. Everything has got to be mobile enabled. That's appropriate, but we've got to move more and more to mobility. And now, the warfighter that you are.
And it's, you know, Mr. Montemarano and I were talking this morning. It's about, and you know, it's about at the enterprise level all the way down to the tactical edge. Because when we're talking about mobility, we've all got, you know, phones and tablets and laptops, and we have that all the way down to the tactical edge. So we have to figure out how we're going to enable those mobile communications, but also protect them as well. And have a good understanding of what risk we're taking with using those devices, because, you know, everybody read the stories online and in the paper, about a year and a half ago, and somebody looked at all the data from the GPS tracking software from some of the fitness apps, and were able to map you know, some of the running tracks within sites overseas. So we have to understand what risk we're taking with using those. And one thing I shared with Mr. N this morning too was, you know, what I really look forward to as we move into the future of mobility is I love having 3 phones, 3 tablets, and 4 laptops right now that I need on a daily basis for work and personal. So maybe if we could cut that down to, you know, like 2 each would be great.
That's right. And right now, what do we have? We have CAT cards. Now we have derived credentials. We're moving that forward. We've got facial recognition. We've got to move on to multi-factor authentication. We've got to take the burden of security off of the user, off of the warfighter. You got to remember, you got a tablet, you got a cell phone in one hand, he's got a rifle in the other hand. Okay, we need our soldiers to be able to have that flexibility and not be burdened with these long passwords or whatever. They've got to be something, I guess, biometric, whatever the smart people come to grips with, but it's got to be usable in the battlefield.
What about performance-based identity? We've heard about that at the conference, where the identification of the person is confirmed by the way they're using
Right.
their mobile device.
Yeah, multi-factor authentication. General Lynn kicked off that project inside the agency where it monitors your gait, the way you hold the machine and whatever. And we've taken it and we've developed quite a bit with it, working very closely with industry, but that's got to go even further. And what they're trying to map it to, that the way you, that along with your behavior patterns, your locations, et cetera, will elevate the trust, and that elevated trust will then in turn authorize you at certain accesses. This is exciting technology, but we're doing some development here at DISA, and that makes me uncomfortable. We need to be exploiting what's out there today, and hopefully we can do more and more of that as we bring that forward. But that's where it has to go, multi-factor authentication, and get moving away from this business of CAC cards or anything like that.
Okay. My next question, Tony, is one of your favorite words. Where are we headed with the cloud?
I love the cloud. Okay. Okay. So the first thing is not everything fits in the cloud, right? Let's acknowledge that. Some things work great in the cloud, and the cloud's an incredible force multiplier in terms of its accessibility and versatility that it gives us. But not everything lends itself to the cloud. And the easy button for putting applications into the cloud, we're still looking for that right now, okay? The fact of the matter is there's nothing easy to get it in. But if we go to the cloud in a conscious, methodical way for the right applications, in other words, chatty applications, there's a question there, I think the cloud's going to be incredibly beneficial to us as we go forward. But let's put it in context. It's not going to cure cancer, but it's going to be incredibly valuable to the Department of Defense.
Incredibly valuable, and we just really need to understand across the board what risk we're accepting with using the clouds, whether they're within DoD networks or we're leveraging AWS, Microsoft, whatever it is. We just have to understand the risk. We have to know how we defend that. How's our data being stored? How do we access that data? You know, how do we know what steps they are taking and can validate that they have taken the steps that we need to be done?
So we can't be resistant to certain things. For example, okay, we're DISA, those of you that have been with us for a long time, well, if you don't do us our way, well, there's resistance. We in DISA are opening up and trying to come to grips with, okay, maybe a fair amount of the computing has to go to the commercial cloud. I'm fine with that, okay? But okay, well, let's go back to what happened with the Fitbits. We weren't paying attention, and all of a sudden we realized Fitbits could map forces, okay? Moving to the commercial cloud is going to be the right thing to do. How do we do it? Doing it with eyes open, with the appropriate factors in place, mechanisms in place to mitigate risk, okay, I think will work really well. Relying upon the CPARs isn't going to cut it when we have outages, okay? We have to come to grips with the commanders that we have in the field today need prompt resolution of problems, and there's always going to be problems. All right, how do we do it? What mechanisms do we put in place? And let's all consciously accept, okay, there's some level of risk. Let's go forth and do it. But let's go in eyes open.
Next technology, IPv6. Are we ready for it?
Okay, have we stopped giving lip service to IPv6 yet?
Stop giving lip service?
Okay.
It has quieted down.
So 2002, Mr. John Stenbert put out the mandate. We are going to IP version 6. I think Vint Cerf was working on that back in 1998. We're going to go to IP version 6. Okay, I think it's happening. Okay, I think it's happening, but it's happening slowly. Of course, foreign countries such as China and much of Europe is moving to it. But we have got to get serious about it and come to grips, open-eyed. How is it going to be as it relates to our defending our environments? Okay, and again, we can't go with the buzzword. We have to come to grips with what's the reality of what IP version 6 gives us. What are we going to do with the install base that is not IP version 6 ready? Okay, how do we do it? It's going to be costly. Okay, and then how do you come to grips with it when it comes to operating the environment?
Well, I think, really to answer the question, are we going to be ready? We have to be. We just don't have a choice. We've been talking about this for a number of years, and so, yes, we will be ready.
What do you have to do, though, to be ready at this juncture?
that's a lot of things, and that's a whole other keynote session that we would have to get into, I think. But yes, we will be ready. It's about making sure that the applications that we use on a daily basis, the sensors that we use are postured and ready, and really across our entire operating environment. You heard me mention earlier our 43 DOD components. Our area of operation commanders, we have to have visibility of all of the areas that they're responsible for, and coordinate and synchronize and make sure that they have the visibility and ability to operate in IPv6. So we're continuing to work through that.
Okay. Back to the government-industry technology relationship. How do you see it evolving? And how much of that will be due to new technologies, and how much will be due to new acquisition patterns?
Okay, I'll take a shot. Again, I think life has changed with regard to the manner in which OSD A&S is approaching acquisition. I think it's changed with the new congressional authorizations as it relates to OTA. The unfortunate part about the answer I'm going to give is it sounds like I'm patronizing AFCEA. But the fact of the matter is the industry government engagement and just talking to each other and talking to each other and talking, it's the only way we're going to work our way through this. We've got to continue to understand each other, understand each other's problems. But we in government have to be extremely careful and recognize that you all are in a profit and loss environment. And when we set up our contracts and whatever, we have got to come to grips with understanding how you have to come at the particular solicitation. Okay, so did I change your question? I'm sorry.
No, it's just I'm wondering what is going to drive changes in the relationship, because changes will take place as a result of, well, in any relationship, it evolves. What's going to drive it more? The fact that we're able to make changes in the acquisition patterns, or technology will force those changes, impel those changes to take place? What's the bigger driver, technology or acquisition improvement?
Yes.
Right.
No, it's really both. Because, I mean, look at the progress that's been made over the past couple of years with how much faster we can be from an acquisition side of the house. Mr. Aaron mentioned the OTAs. And on the contracting side of the house, I met with GSA just earlier this week, and they were telling me about some great things they're doing on the contracting side of the house. And DITCO, they're continuing to work with industry and make significant improvements in enhancing our ability to get technology employed out to the force. And then in technologies, it's what's going to drive it is being able to bring in the technology that's going to, like I'd mentioned before, take more and more of the human out of the equation, so we can allow the machines to do what they can do. Right. We don't always have to be a part of every single thing that's done. Right.
I think one of the relationship things that has evolved since the 90s. I've been a program manager since 1986, and I would always have my Gantt charts and my program charts, and I'd have the development and the awards and all this other business, and then we'd finally get to solution set. And of course, like most program managers, the miracle happened. But anyway, we would get to the solution, and that was I used to build those charts all the time. Now the charts that people bring to me have the whole development effort and then the protest period, okay, that we have to wait we can expect to go through the protest period. And I, for one, have found that to be very depressing, okay, very depressing that we have to plan on it being protested. And so that, I'm going to say this, I've said it before, what people need to understand is because we've gotten into such a protest-prone environment, that has pushed the government into a position of not only double-checking our work, but triple-checking and quadrupling our checking to ensure we don't lose in a protest. What is that doing for the warfighter? We've just delayed the capability for how many months, or in some cases years, because we're dealing with the protests. Now, there are some protests that are absolutely critical that need to have happened. But there are so many frivolous protests that we have had to deal with that have simply delayed capability. But not only does it delay capability of the warfighter, and I defer to you all in industry, what does that do to your bids and proposal expenses? What does that do to you keeping all those consultants online waiting for the contract to finally be awarded? We have got to come to grips with this protest business. OTAs helps us to avoid protests to a great extent, but you know, we all have our lawyers and they'll figure out a way to start protesting those things as well. But in any event, Bill, that was for you. But the point being here, we have got to collectively figure out how to do it. You got a major thing going on right now that's being protested. Yeah, it's a big thing, but there's going to be so many more big things. There is a ton of activity coming out of the federal government, and we got to recognize that this one might not be worth it. Okay, you didn't get this one, there'll be another one, then there's going to be another one. So we've got to get out of this protest-prone environment. I'm done.
If I could add one thing to that.
Please.
Not to that, but on a lighter note. When you look at some of the things that we're doing with Cyber Command and that Cyber Command is doing with industry, some of the pilot programs, that when I mentioned earlier about industry being more agile with us, that's a prime example of what can be done between government and industry when you really integrate each other and take kind of a DevOps approach to finding new solutions to hard problems. And I see that as being more and more applicable and useful as we go into the future.
Well, Jeff, you just answered my follow-up question.
Oh, good.
Great.
So let me move on to one more.
Okay. We're going to get
Technology.
the hook is coming.
I see.
I shouldn't have talked about protests.
Technology is a means to an end. Technology is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. What technology dots do we need to connect to get to this desired end?
This is another pet peeve of mine, and that is technology is fabulous, but unfortunately, it's the culture is the issue, and that is we take new technology and we adapt it to yesterday's business processes. We have got to change our mindset in government as well as anybody using technology. We have to recognize that technology changes our lives and changes the way we're going to do business, so we have to adapt our business processes to truly exploit technology.
Jeff, your perspective?
My perspective is it's about connecting the dots, but it's also about figuring out what dots need to be added to the board. And for me, that's visibility across, for instance, across all of the DODIN. One of the first steps in securing something is to be able to see everything that you're responsible for. And so technology is already enabling us to do that, and will continue to enable us to do that as we implement efforts across from endpoint security to perimeter security, and industry is helping us get better and better with it.
Well, I see General Shea is approaching. I tend to yield to my boss. Sir?
Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I think we got a good perspective, a lot of history there, Tony.
Yeah, it's
1985, 86, is that what it was?
86, yeah, with General
Berry,
remember General
We're
Berry?
only, 11 years behind Stenbit's target there with IP?
That's only 11, that's right.
So, well, anyway.
We were
thank
supposed
you,
to go
gentlemen.
paperless in 96, but go ahead, keep going.
Well, you're a senior to me, right?
I think so.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I mean, there's a lot of great insight there, a lot of historic, and a lot of background for why things are the way they are, and also a great look as we move to the future. Sometimes things aren't just, there's a lot going on underneath the surface. There's a lot of background that goes into a lot of these challenges. It's just not a matter of snapping your fingers and having these solutions or the answers to these questions come forward. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your thoughts as we go forward here today. So thank you again very much. I want to thank everyone for being here and sharing your comments with us. In lieu of a speaker gift for AFCEA, will make a donation to the Fisher House in your behalf. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. And so we've come to the closing of TechNet 2019. We would like to thank all the mission partners in advance for their advice and counsel as we developed the program for this event. In particular, we'd like to thank the Office of the DoD CIO, the Defense Information Systems Agency, and the Joint Force Headquarters DODIN. They've been great partners in this event, so thank you all very much. We also want to thank our sponsors and industry partners for their support of the conference and working with AFCEA to provide the best support possible for the Department of Defense and government customers. In addition, we want to thank CompTIA and CertNexus, the certifying organizations that reviewed our sessions for support of cybersecurity continuing education requirements. We'd also like to thank our preferred providers for the superb support and the instruction that they provide. You know, AFCEA is proud to put on an event, and I hope it's clear to how dedicated we are to accomplishing our mission in support of national security. Please consider becoming a member of AFCEA. If you aren't one currently, just go to www.afcea.org. And I imagine many of you will be joining AFCEA in Augusta later in this summer, in August, as we make our travel plans. Please know we are pleased to announce a new part of this program. This is something that's pertinent and relevant to just about everybody in this audience. On 22 and 23 August, Thursday and Friday, we'll present an acquisition and program manager program with PEO and PM presentations and portfolio reviews. This new component ends on Friday at noon to accommodate your travel plan. So please consider attending as you make those flight and hotel arrangements for Augusta. That's a great event, and if you really want to know what's going on inside the acquisition community and the acquisition world, I think it'll provide you some great insights. To help us make the upcoming events and next year's Cyber Symposium, Defensive Cyber Operations Symposium, TechNet Cyber, better, please take a moment and go to the app and use the Rate This Session feature for all the sessions you attended this week. We take this feedback very seriously, and it's the way we build the program and continually to improve on the product and the quality of the presentations and the thought leadership that we'd like you and our speakers and panel members to present as we go forward. And so your feedback is critical to the future of this event as we plan going forward. This conference will now conclude with Meet the Senior session in the registration lobby. This will be your chance to engage with DISA leadership in an informal setting. I mean, this is one of the things that is really unique about this event. DISA has gone out of its way to make sure that they have that exchange. You heard Mr. Montemarano talk about, and Admiral Norton has referred to earlier, about that exchange of information between industry and government. So here is your opportunity to do it. Please take advantage of it. Again, thank you for attending. Travel safely and look forward to seeing you again. Please mark your calendar for TechNet Cyber, June 2 to 4, 2020, back here in Baltimore. Thank you all very much for attending, and again, safe travels.